It was a calm and bright morning, the kind of morning that feels peaceful, as if the day is promising something special. The sky was painted blue, with soft sunlight warming the rooftops. From a quiet house in a normal neighborhood, a young man stepped outside. His name was Jae-Yeon-jo. Dode in his hand, Jae-Yeon-jo held a bicycle. It wasn't just any bike, it was a fixie. A fixed-gear bike, simple in design, without the usual features most modern bikes have. No gears, no brakes, just pedals, tires, and speed. It was old, and for many people, unusual. Jae-Yeon-jo mounted the bike, adjusting his position. With one smooth motion, he pushed off the ground and began pedaling. His expression was calm, even uninterested. It seemed like just another normal ride to school, but the way his legs moved fast, smooth, powerful told a different story. As he pedaled down the street, other students were on their way to school too. Most were walking in groups, chatting casually, carrying their bags, but they all stopped when Jae-Yeon-jo sped past them. A blur of motion. The wind followed behind him. Was that a bicycle? One student asked aloud, confused. No way it could be that fast. Everyone turned their heads, eyes wide in disbelief. His speed was unbelievable. It was like he wasn't riding on the road, but flying just above it. His legs never stopped moving. His focus was sharp, and every turn, every push, seemed intentional, like he was in a race. A real race. Not just going to school. The sidewalk, the road, the people, none of it seemed to slow Jae-Yeon-jo down. He passed every single person in front of him without effort. He didn't look around. He didn't smile. He was in his own world, and in that world, he was the only one moving. Soon, the normal roads gave way to something else. A slope, a steep hill that dropped sharply into the next part of town. At the bottom of the hill, a group of cycling enthusiasts had gathered. They stood in a small crowd, all sharing a deep love for bikes. They weren't just casual riders, they were serious about it. Among them stood TJ Kim from Mountain High School. He stood tall, confident, dressed sharply. His bicycle stood next to him, a carbon frame masterpiece, the kind used by professionals. Light, expensive, and designed for high performance. He looked like someone who came from money, and his bike reflected that. The others listened to him speak, clearly respecting him. The riders were busy talking, comparing bikes and gear, when suddenly, they noticed something at the top of the hill. A figure had appeared, a lone boy standing quietly with a bicycle. It was Jae-Yeon-jo. Everyone looked up, confused. Some squinted to see clearly. Then, the shock hit them. He's on a fixie, someone muttered. There was silence. A fixed gear bike. No gears, no brakes. On this hill, he's not actually going to ride down that, is he? Another voice said. The idea seemed insane. The hill was steep, curved, and dangerous. For a normal bike with gears and brakes, it would already be risky. But for a fixie, it was unthinkable. No one in their right mind would try it. But Jae-Yeon-jo didn't hesitate. He stood at the edge, looking down calmly. The wind caught his hair. His hands gripped the handlebars tightly. In that moment, memories flashed in his mind. He heard the voice of his parent, his father, a doctor. The words were firm, serious, filled with pressure. You must be an excellent student. You must always be number one. Don't waste your time playing. Study hard, focus, succeed. But those words, while remembered, didn't seem to hold power over him. Jae-Yeon-jo didn't smile, he didn't frown. He simply chose to ride, and then he launched. The crowd at the bottom gasped as Jae-Yeon-jo descended. His bike gained speed, fast, too fast. But he didn't slow down. His legs moved with precision, his balance perfect. The tires gripped the road as he curved into the slope. His eyes never blinked. Then, at the most dangerous moment, he began to skid. The back wheel slid sideways, controlled and clean. This was skidding, a move only done by experienced riders. It was how you slow down a fixie without brakes. Skidding was your only tool, and Jae-Yeon-jo performed it like a master. Dust flew up. The sound of rubber against asphalt echoed, and then silence. He landed safely at the bottom, bike steady, not a scratch, not a wobble. He stood straight, calm, like it was nothing. The other riders were stunned. Some looked amazed, others looked jealous. He's just showing off. One person said bitterly, staring at Jae-Yeon-jo's old plain bike. He just wants attention with that piece of junk. But others were speechless. There was something different about this boy. Among the spectators was Jun Lee from Sunny High School. She narrowed her eyes. She had seen that face before. Something clicked in her memory. She turned to the boy beside her. Minu Yu, also from Sunny High School. Isn't he the student council president at our school? Jun Lee asked. Minu Yu stared at Jae-Yeon-jo with deep interest. Yeah, I think he is. Later that day, at Sunny High School, the atmosphere inside the classroom was calm. The students were busy with their lessons. Among them sat Jaeon Jo, also known as Jae-jo, quietly focused on his studies. He looked calm, serious, his attention locked onto the pages of his book. His posture was relaxed but determined. He looked like someone who wanted to stay unnoticed. Next to Jae-jo, a girl named Mia sat at her desk. Her eyes weren't on her own textbook. Instead, she glanced sideways at Jae-jo every few seconds, observing him silently. She seemed curious about him, studying the way he read, the way he kept to himself as she watched him. Her friend Yuna walked up and leaned down toward her with a playful expression. "Is the student council president, Jae-jo, treating you well?" Yuna asked, smiling teasingly. Mia smiled slightly and answered, her voice light, and the two girls started chatting casually. Their conversation was filled with small giggles and whispers. The mood was relaxed until something interrupted them. Outside the classroom, there was a sudden stir. The sound of multiple girls' voices grew louder. Laughter, squeals, excitement. Someone was arriving, and he was clearly a big deal. A tall boy entered the room, followed by a small crowd of girls who looked excited to be near him. His name was Manhwa. He had an easy smile, messy but stylish hair, and a cool aura that made it obvious why the girls liked him. He wasn't just another student, he was popular, admired, and definitely used to the attention. From their seats, inside the class, Yuna and Mia looked toward the door, confused. "What is Manhwa doing here?" one of them asked, surprised. Manhwa stepped into the room, smirking, and looked around until his eyes landed on Yuna. He raised his hand and pointed at her with a mocking grin. "I'm not here for some grandma like you," he said teasingly. While Yuna's expression changed instantly, her eyes flared up with irritation. "Did you just call me grandma?" she snapped. Before she could explode further, Mia let out a small laugh and looked at the two of them. "Why do you two always fight?" Mia said with a soft tone. "You're twins, aren't you?" Yes, it was true. Despite their constant arguments, Yuna and Manhwa were twin siblings. They didn't look exactly alike, but the resemblance was clear once you paid attention, and their dynamic made sense. Like fire and ice, always clashing. At the back of the classroom, another student had been quietly watching the whole scene. His name was Dom Kang Jr. Even though Yuna was angry, her energy, her fire-ites seemed to only make her more attractive in his eyes. He stared at her with admiration, thinking silently how cool she still looked, even while yelling. "What's happening, Manhwa? You had something else in mind." His real target wasn't Yuna, despite his teasing. He walked past the others and approached Jae-jo, who was still seated at his desk, fully focused on his schoolwork. Without hesitation, Manhwa leaned in close and said, "Hey, you, I saw what you did yesterday." Jae-jo didn't look up. "That skidding downhill, that was amazing." Still, Jae-jo said nothing. He just kept reading. "I want you to join my crew." Manhwa added, "My cycling crew. You'd fit in." No response. Not even a glance. Jae-jo didn't even blink. He continued studying, as if Manhwa wasn't there. His cold, focused silence clearly annoyed Manhwa, who finally pulled away with a frustrated scoff and walked out of the room. But inside, Jae-jo's heart was stirred. He wasn't ignoring Manhwa out of arrogance. In truth, he loved bicycles. His thoughts drifted for a moment, back to a memory. Years ago, on his birthday, his uncle had given him his first bike. That moment changed everything. It wasn't just a gift, it was the beginning of a passion. That bike, that feeling of freedom, the wind in his face, he had fallen in love with it. That was the true reason he rode. The school day eventually came to an end. Students began to leave, conversations echoing in the halls. As Jae-jo prepared to go home, Manhwa returned once again. This time, he didn't tease or joke. "There's someone who wants to race you," Manhwa said seriously. "Tonight, Jae-jo looked at him for the first time. "Come if you want, Manhwa added. "You don't have to join the crew, but you'll want to see this." And just like that, he turned and walked away, leaving Jae-jo standing there, deep in thought, with the gears of curiosity turning slowly in his mind. Even after everything that had been said earlier, Jae-jo still had no interest in joining Manhwa's cycling crew. As they stood near the school entrance, with the sky beginning to darken, Jae-jo gave his answer plainly. No, he didn't explain himself. He didn't get angry. He simply turned to walk away. But Manhwa wasn't finished. With a sly grin, he raised his voice just enough for Jae-jo to hear. "Well, that's too bad," he said casually. "I guess you're not interested in hearing what TJ Kim said about your bike." That made Jae-jo pause. He was talking trash. Manhwa continued. kept going on and on about your old fixie. Said it's a piece of junk. Said you're just showing off because you don't have a real bike. Still no reaction from J-Joe, but his hand tightened slightly around the strap of his backpack. Minu, you looked at him carefully. You know, he added, I don't really care what kind of bike someone rides. Carbon, alloy, steel, fixie, it's just parts. What I do hate is people who think specs decide everything. That attitude, that needs to be crushed. He took a step back. I'm not forcing you, Minu, you said, lifting his hands. Come, if you want. Don't come if you don't. I just thought it'd be fun to see the look on TJ Kim's face when he loses. He gave J-Joe a slight nod and turned away. But just in case, if you change your mind, we'll be at Green Park. Tonight, as the moon rose over the city, Green Park came to life. It was a wide open area surrounded by trees, hills, and winding paths, a perfect place for a secret night race. Street lamps buzzed dimly, casting gold pools of light. The cool evening air buzzed with excitement. Groups of teenagers had gathered. Most of them were riders, wearing hoodies, gloves, sneakers, helmets, ready to race, ready to watch. Their bikes leaned against fences and trees, shining under the park lights. The hum of conversation filled the space, but everyone was really here for one thing. Speed.Minuu was already there, leaning against a railing with a calm expression. Beside him stood Jun Lee, watching the crowd silently with her arms crossed. She looked composed, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the people around her. Suddenly, the crowd shifted. TJ Kim had arrived, dressed in sleek gear, his posture confident. TJ Kim approached with his signature carbon frame bike glinting under the lights. He smirked as he spotted Minu. You still waiting? Huh, TJ Kim said. Looks like your little schoolboy's not showing up after all. He laughed and looked around as if expecting applause. A few people nearby chuckled nervously. You sure he wasn't just scared? TJ Kim added. But before Minu could respond, the sound of tires rolling softly across pavement caught their attention. A figure walked into view, pushing a simple fixie, wearing a hoodie with the hood up. Quiet and unnoticed, J-Joe had arrived. He didn't say a word. He didn't look at anyone. He stopped near the group, lowered the hood from his head, and looked around briefly. Then, his eyes locked forward as he calmly asked, Who's my opponent? No greetings, no small talk, no hesitation. The crowd fell into a hush. A small group of riders had already finished marking the race route. They had placed people with flashlights at certain key points, sharp turns, intersections, blind spots, so the riders wouldn't get lost or crash. The course was short, but dangerous. Only the confident dared ride it at full speed. The matchup was clear. Now TJ Kim versus J-Joe. Both riders moved into position. They stood at the starting line, bikes ready. TJ Kim glanced at J-Joe with a mocking smile, but J-Joe's face didn't change. He was completely focused. The crowd moved back, giving them space. One of the race organizers stepped forward. He raised his hand, holding a small gear cog. The racers lowered their bodies into position. Hands on handlebars, feet on pedals. The gear was dropped. Clink. And, just like that, the race began. The race between J-Joe and TJ Kim had officially begun. As soon as the gear hit the ground, TJ Kim surged ahead just as expected. His bike, a top-of-the-line carbon frame machine, accelerated smoothly and instantly. It was built for speed, built for precision, and in the opening seconds, it gave him a clear advantage. With a confident smirk on his face, TJ Kim glanced over his shoulder and shouted, That scrap bike of yours can't even touch me. The crowd, watching from the sidelines, gasped as TJ Kim widened the gap. His pedaling was controlled and sharp, his movements smooth and professional. Everything about his posture said he'd done this 100 times before, but J-Joe said nothing. He simply lowered his body and pushed harder. His legs spun with brutal intensity. The chain on his old fixie tightened, the crank rotating like a blur. The lack of gears didn't stop Jim. In fact, it only seemed to fuel him. Every inch of pavement was claimed through pure effort, and slowly the gap began to close. TJ Kim's smirk faded. He's catching up, he muttered under his breath. He clenched his teeth. He didn't like that, not one bit. Then an idea came to him, a dirty one. As he neared the edge of a narrow section of the route, TJ Kim shifted his weight and kicked out hard, his foot smashing into one of the traffic cones that had been placed to mark the lane. The cone flew directly into J-Joe's path. It hit the ground, tumbled, and rolled right in front of him, forcing him to swerve sharply. For a second, J-Joe looked like he was going to lose control, and just ahead a parked car sat at the edge of the route. The crowd screamed, He's gonna crash. He can't stop. But Jejo didn't slow down. Instead, he launched himself with perfect timing and zero hesitation. He pulled up his front wheel, lifted his body, and hopped cleanly over the car, landing on the other side, with both wheels hitting pavement like thunder. Gasps erupted from every direction. He jumped it. No way. He jumped the car. Now, with even more momentum from the descent, Jejo accelerated again, his breathing steady. His eyes locked on the rider ahead. And now he was right behind T.J. Kim. The next section of the route was one of the most dangerous. A tight, downhill turn where riders were expected to brake hard to avoid flying off the path. T.J. Kim, having no choice, began to brake. His back wheel skidded slightly as he slowed, just enough to keep his line safe. But behind him, Jejo did the opposite. Didn't brake. He leaned into the turn. His speed increased, and then he drifted. The entire back wheel swung out in a controlled slide, his body angling so low it nearly touched the pavement. His left leg stiffened for balance, and the tire screeched. Against the curve, a perfect drift. The crowd near the corner exploded. No way. He drifted the turn. That's not possible on a fixed seat. Even T.J. Kim, glancing back for just a second, was visibly shocked. His eyes widened as he watched the impossible unfold right behind him, and then it happened. Jejo pulled up alongside him, with a calm, unreadable face. He turned just slightly and pointed back toward himself with his thumb toward his own backside. Then he said, with no hesitation, "Now it's your turn to stare at my ass." T.J. Kim's face turned red instantly. His jaw clenched. His pride snapped. "You little..." Anger surged through him as he dropped his body lower and started pushing himself to the limit. Every muscle in his legs tensed, and he began pedaling, harder than ever before. His carbon wheels spun fast enough to blur, and sparks practically flew from his tires. He wasn't going to lose. Not to this guy, not to a fixie, not to someone riding a scrap bike. The final stretch loomed ahead. The battle had just become personal. As the race neared its peak, Jejo pulled slightly ahead, his voice calm but sharp. "Let's finish this in 4 minutes," he said, without even turning his head. The way he said it wasn't just a challenge, it was an insult. T.J. Kim clenched, his jaw tightly. He was beyond frustrated now. His face was twisted in anger, and the grip on his handlebars tightened. He was sick of this kid, sick of that cocky attitude, sick of being taunted by someone riding an old brakeless fix, i.e., so he pushed harder. Their bikes flew down a steep downhill section of the course. The wind roared past their ears. Trees blurred into streaks of green on both sides. Neither of them slowed. There was no room for hesitation now, only raw speed. They were at their maximum velocity, pedals spinning like turbines, tires whistling. Against the pavement, neither rider gave an inch. At the end of the slope, a tight turn waited, sharper and more dangerous than any turn so far. Jejo reached it first. And without slowing down, he drifted again. But this time, the road wasn't flat. The slope dropped sharply just before the corner, making it nearly impossible to control. As his bike began to slide, Jejo extended his leg and kicked the guardrail, a precise move to stabilize himself mid-drift. The metal railing shook violently from the impact, but Jejo stayed balanced. Riding the curve out like it was part of a skate park, he made it. Barely. The spectators watching from above screamed in disbelief. He kicked the rail. He didn't even slow down. That's insane. But behind him, T.J. Kim had no such option. He wasn't used to drifting. His carbon bike wasn't made for it. As he approached the turn, panic started to set in. He pulled the brakes as hard as he could, but it was too late. The momentum from the steep downhill was too powerful. His tires screeched, but they didn't grip the road enough. The bike couldn't stop. With a sickening crack, T.J. Kim crashed straight into the metal guardrail, his body slamming hard against the barrier. The sound echoed across the park. His bike twisted underneath him. His helmet cracked slightly at the side. Gasps filled the air. Someone yelled. He crashed. From the road ahead, Jejo looked over his shoulder for a moment. He saw the wreck. He saw T.J. Kim sitting on the ground, half conscious, clearly injured. But he didn't stop. He didn't even hesitate. He just turned his eyes back forward and muttered, under his breath, "Loser." And with that, he kept riding. Down the final stretch.com/steady, alone. When Jejo reached the finish line, there was no applause, just silence. Everyone stood frozen, trying to process what they had just seen. Jejo coasted to a stop. His hoodie flapped gently in the wind. His chest rose and fell with quiet, steady breaths. He wasn't tired. He wasn't even smiling. Mind you, standing near the finish, stepped forward in disbelief. "Where's TJ?" he asked. "Did he crash?" Jejo didn't even look at him. "He just walked past," said plainly. From now on, don't bother me with these trash races. Mind you said nothing. He stood frozen, eyes wide. Just then, commotion rose from behind. The crowd turned there, slowly making their way to the finish. Line Junli appeared, carrying someone on her back. It was TJ Kim. Blood trickled down the side of his face. One arm dangled loosely, and his breathing was ragged, but he was conscious barely. People gasped. Is that TJ? What happened to him? Manu, you rushed forward. What happened? Junli, her face serious but calm, didn't answer. She gently set TJ Kim down near the sidewalk, and then TJ Kim, shaking with pain and rage, lifted his head and screamed, "Bring that bastard to me."